really made a name for themselves by taking the classic Western footwear and modernizing it by making their boots with more modern techniques, more modern materials, in an attempt to make them more comfortable, more durable, and more lightweight, in their words. But is that just branding and marketing, or is it actually true? Well, Ariat sent us 3 of their cowboy boots in 3 different price points, and basically for 3 different purposes, to cut them all in half, to give you the full spectrum of what Ariat has to offer when it comes to their modernized cowboy boots, so that you can see what you're spending your hard-earned money on for various price points for Ariat, and to see if Ariat actually makes real cowboy boots. And thanks to Ariat for sponsoring this video and sending us these 3 boots to cut in half. Be sure to check out the links in the description. And I'll also put a link in the description of the $2,000 Viberg boots that we just reviewed on the Anvil 2 channel. It's like a 30-minute full breakdown of the most expensive boots I've ever bought. So a quick history of Ariat. Well, it was founded in 1993 by Beth Cross and Pam Parker. They were consultants for Reebok. So this whole modernizing thing starts to make a little bit more sense. And they saw that opportunity to put sneaker and athletic shoe tech into the English and Western riding boots. And they decided on the name Ariat after the name of the horse Secretariat, which I thought was a cool touch. And they released their first boot in 1993. And over the time, they expanded into riding apparel, workwear, and everything that Ariat offers now. And they've gone from the small 2-person thing up into expanding into distribution into Europe, Australia, Mexico, and Japan. And then by 2009, they've already had grown to a point where they were the official sponsor of the PBR, not the ring. And then in 2015, they became the official sponsor of the International Federation of Equestrian Sports. 2018, Beth Cross was awarded the Entrepreneur of the Year. And then in 2020, Ariat is reported to be the largest equestrian footwear and apparel brand in the world. And I really like the history of Ariat because that's where all the best innovation comes from, is when somebody from a different industry takes the advantages, the techniques, all the materials, and implants it into a more stagnant industry like the cowboy boot industry, and they become huge. And I thought that was a really cool story, and I thought it was worth going over. But now let's dig into the boots and see how much sneaker tech and like modern technology is actually in these boots. So let's go over the contenders first. The first one is our cheapest boot, the Rambler, at $179. The next boot is the Rancher at $195. The final boot is the Gallup, and this boot retails for $459. So the most expensive out of the group. So those are the 3 contenders. So now I'll start going through all the details. So if we look at the leather first on the Rambler, so this leather thickness is 1.8 on the upper and about 2.4 millimeters thick on the vamp. So pretty thick leather, especially for a sub $200 boot. Well, both of these leathers look like they're a full grain leather that's been sanded down to remove any of the top layer imperfections. And if we put these leathers on our grading system, if you look at the cross section, there's still some grain in both of the leathers. You can see that maybe the vamp leather has a little bit of a print embossed into it where the shaft might not. And we did a quick burn test, and as you can see, both of these leathers don't have a heavy plastic coating on top. So to me, that would be a B grade leather. And as for how they performed in our puncture test or rattlesnake test, the shaft took only 39 pounds to puncture. The vamp took 81 pounds. Then if we move to the Rancher, so this is a chrome tan leather as well. The shaft thickness is 1.5 millimeters. The vamp thickness is 2.5 millimeters, so similar to the previous boot. And both of these leathers are kind of an oil tan leather where there's tons of conditioning and oil worked into the leathers. And they usually use oil tan leather on work boots because it doesn't take nearly as much conditioning and care. They're kind of self-conditioning to some degree. So it's that full grain leather, sanded down slightly, because you can tell by the cross section it still has the grain in there. And we burned it, and this has even less of a top coat than the previous boot. And so same thing, B grade leather. And then we did the rattlesnake test on the upper and the vamp, and both of them took 59.5 pounds to pierce, which still is not rattlesnake proof because apparently rattlesnakes can bite at 150 pounds of force. Then moving to our most expensive boot, the nearly $500 boot, the Gallup. So this is a unique leather because, as you can tell, the vamp of this is ostrich skin. Like these little bumps here are where the ostrich feathers were plucked before tanning this leather. But as for the quality of this leather, the upper leather is 1.2 millimeters thick and the vamp is 1.3 millimeters thick. So quite a bit thinner, but I think that's part of just ostrich skin. Not chickens, birds just don't have as thick a skin as cows and horses. So it's just natural to see a little bit thinner leather. And I'm guessing on the inside it's lined to kind of build up the strength. But once again, this isn't a work boot. It's a stylish boot. It's a boot that's not made for work. It's the more traditional looking boot. And as for how this stacks up on our grading system, if you look at the cross section of the shaft, you can see there's a little bit of a grain in there. And we did the burn test on it, and I thought there was a lot of plastic on top, but it didn't really melt or burn. And there clearly is a lot of paint and pigment on top and a little bit of an embossed print, but it's not so much that I would drop it below a B grade, so I would say that's a B grade leather. And as for the ostrich, I honestly don't know enough about ostrich leather to grade it. I have an ostrich Apple Watch strap, but it was made from the leg leather and not the upper, so this is actually the first time I've ever dealt with ostrich leather, so I honestly have no idea. But I wouldn't really rely on this leather to be nearly as durable as any cow leather just because of how thin it is and how loose it is. It's a show leather. But we still ran the rattlesnake test on it, and the shaft took 75.5 pounds to pierce, and the vamp only took 48 pounds to pierce. So just from that test alone, it is a little bit less durable, less puncture resistant of a leather, but you pay the premium for the ostrich skin. I think that's part of why this is so expensive, because ostrich is not cheap. So basically across the board, all B grade leathers, decent leathers, something you could work in except for this one. But what about the outsoles? This is part of what makes these boots so interesting to me. If we look at the outsoles, the Ramblers have a full rubber outsole. It's a single unit. There's no like separation in the heel. And we did a durometer test on it, and it came in at a 70 Shore A. Then if we look at the Rancher, this is also oil and slip resistant DuraTread sole, and this is just a little bit harder than the previous boot at a 79 Shore A, so maybe a little bit more durable. And the Rancher is not a unit outsole, because you can see there's a separate layer for the heel, you've got a midsole in there, you've got a welt layer, so slightly different style of outsole than the previous boot. And the real different boot is the Gallup, because this is the Dual Pro leather sole with rubber wear zones for durability. It has a rubber top lift, and you can see that it's a leather outsole, but they've cut out certain areas where the leather underneath shows through. The reason they did this is they're attempting to solve the problem that most people have with cowboy boots, is how slippery they are. So the idea with this outsole is to combine the durability and traction of a rubber outsole with the classic look of a leather outsole. So we did the durometer test on these as well, and it was 91 Shore A on the leather, and the rubber bits came in at a 71 Shore A, so pretty on par with the other two boots. And we ran the puncture test on these three boot outsoles. The Rambler took 76 pounds, the Rancher took 136 pounds, and the Gallup took 130 pounds. So really the only boot that didn't perform great was the Rambler. And then if we move to the insoles, the Rambler and the Ranchers have the exact same insole to the T, exact same, just like a typical foam. It's like a nice memory foam filling insole. It's their all-day cushioning, decent insole. And the Gallup has a slightly better insole. It's basically the exact same thing, except for you have this little patch of almost like a Dr. Scholl's like gummy material at the heel, but essentially the exact same insole across the board, except for this little patch there. But more importantly, now that we have these insoles removed, we can start to see how these boots are built. And if they're built more traditionally with a leather insole, like these previous boots we dissected with Tecovas and Tony Lama, or if it's more like modern work boots with fiberboard throughout the whole construction. So if we look down in there, it looks like on the Ramblers we have compressed cardboard and fiberboard. On the inside of the Ranchers, the exact same thing, compressed cardboard with fiberboard. And then the more traditional Gallup is full fiberboard. So not any leather on the insole at all. So that's where we're starting to see some of these differences coming from the sneaker world and more of the work boot world. It's built like a mid-tier work boot with the fiberboard on the insole. Let's talk about the construction, because they're kind of all over the place with the construction. If we look at the Ramblers, you can see there's a stitch line that goes through there. And if I feel down on the inside, I can feel that stitch line. So it looks like it's a combination of a cemented construction where they glue the outsole on, and a Blake stitch construction where there's a stitch line going through the outsole, through the midsole, into the insole, sewing all those layers together. And then if we look at the Rancher, you can see that we have a welt wrapping around the boot. But to check to see if it's a Goodyear welt, you just pull that upper slightly away, and I don't see any stitches going to the inside. It looks like it's cemented. I can see that there's another stitch line on the bottom of the boot that doesn't line up with the Goodyear welt. So if I stick my hand in there, I can feel that it's a Blake stitch construction. So I'm assuming that this is not a true Goodyear welted boot. It's a Blake stitch construction that is also cemented like the previous boot, but has multiple layers and has a fake Goodyear welt on it. But it is on par with other work boots in this price point. So it's not that big of a deal. I was just hoping it was Goodyear welt. And then to our highest quality boot, you can see that this one is a true Goodyear welted boot, because you can see those stitch lines go all the way through the outsole. And if you pull the upper away just a little bit, you can see that there's a gap there that it's not been glued and cemented. So this boot is a true Goodyear welted construction with some brass nails tacking down the arch of the boot, more similar to a traditional boot. Then I would assume that the heel is nailed down in a traditional cowboy boot way as well. So to recap that, we have the Rambler that is predominantly a cemented construction with a reinforced Blake stitch. The Rancher is predominantly a Blake stitch construction that's also cemented. And then we have a more traditional Goodyear welted boot with the nails in the arch of the boot. So pretty on par so far for the price range of each of these boots and all the different components and the materials used. But that only means so much because the real story of all these boots is what's on the inside. So now let's cut them in half. That was a bad idea. All right, I got them all chopped in half, so let's see what's inside of all these boots, starting with the Rambler first. So very similar construction on all three of these boots. Basically from the insole down, all three of them have compressed cardboard with a composite shank with fiberboard underneath and another layer of compressed cardboard. So that's really similar to what you'd see in almost all work boots in this price range, especially the cemented ones that are not the traditionally made work boots with Goodyear welts. Everything that's cemented follows this same pattern. And I thought for sure we'd see more leather, especially in the Gallup boot. Once again, this is not a work boot. Nobody buys ostrich skin boots for work. It's a show boot. But even still, it's kind of interesting seeing how this ostrich skin is structured. It's so much more, it's almost like cotton candy on the inside. It's crazy. So really with this Gallup boot, a lot of what you're paying for is this ostrich skin. You know, if you had cow leather throughout this boot would probably cost $250, judging off the construction, maybe that $300 price range with the full leather heel stack, which for a show boot, if that's what you want, you got to pay a premium for the ostrich skin. But keep in mind that that's what you're paying for this boot for. Paying for this boot for? I don't know if that made any sense. So once again, a lot more similar to the work boots in this price range. And if you look at these three boots compared to the Tony Lamas and Tacovas that we've cut apart that are way more traditional with the lemon wood pegs, full leather construction, you can see there's a huge difference between how these boots are built. The Ariats, like we said at the very beginning, they're a lot more similar to the work boots, a lot more synthetic materials, a lot more built like sneakers and coming from that sneaker world than the traditional cowboy boot world. And there are some trade-offs either way, you know, because they're not going to be quite as durable when it comes to the sole construction, but they are going to be a little bit more comfortable and easier to break in. The Ariats don't have the traditional techniques and materials, but they are $50 to $100 cheaper than these boots, and they serve two completely different purposes. Ariat has made their name for doing more work boot cowboy boots. These are traditional cowboy boots. So they're essentially two different classes, and at the end of the day, are these cowboy boots? I would say they're kind of like half cowboy boots, to be honest, because the upper is clearly full cowboy, but the sole construction is not. So if you're looking for a traditional cowboy boot, Ariat's maybe not the brand for you, but if you're looking for a hybrid cowboy boot that has all the benefits of a $200 work boot, but looks like a cowboy boot, that's where Ariat stands out amongst these other cowboy boots that we've done and the other cowboy boots we have planned. So this kind of surprised me. I thought for sure that we'd see a lot more variation in how these boots are built, but it seems like Ariat's found the technique that works for them in the construction, and they've just stuck with it across the board. And Ariat does have some cowboy boots that have the full traditional leather sole on them, like these here. So we might do a follow-up video in the future comparing the leather soles and how they're built compared to their more hybrid boots like we cut apart on this video. So I'll put some links in the description so you can see both styles and decide which one you prefer. So let me know what you guys think, and if you have a pair of Ariats, what your experience has been with them, especially compared to a traditional cowboy boot. And don't forget, the Whites collab drops September 15th. We're only doing 200 boots, and we finally got final approval for the two things that I'm really excited. I think that you guys are really gonna like about this boot. We'll show you a little teaser at the end credit scene of this video or whatever, because I think you're really gonna like it. We're combining a little bit of a DIY plus a customization plus the highest quality boots in the world, and they're a little bit cowboy inspired, but not so overtly cowboy. I love these boots, and I think they were gonna go pretty quick. So be sure to get on this limited edition email list, and thanks again to Ariat for sponsoring this video, and thank you guys for always supporting these videos. It's so fun and it means a lot to me, so thank you guys. See ya.